As I look upon my life, there's a passion inside. Heaven knows I'm living my dreams. As I look upon my life, there's a passion inside. Heaven knows I'm living my dream.
Good morning, Johannesburg, South Africa, Namibia, and the world out there. Welcome to this morning's show, Talk with Joan, and I'm your stand-in host, generally a co-host, and I'm standing in for Joan this morning. I just want to say, Ma, wherever you are, you're enjoying life. We say good morning, and I'm so excited because I always say to you that ek gun die stadium in julle lewe vir julle because you've worked hard to get to where you are. So go live your best life. Ons is 'n bietjie jealous, maar ons gaan julle nie wys nie. Ons is net happy. And then we have our co-host. She's back. Drum roll. Pastor Violet is back in studio, so we are excited to have you back here. I know that you had a good time. Yeah. Good time and some not so good time, but you are here. God's grace has kept you, and we are grateful for that. Would you like to say morning to the people out there?
Yes, I would like to say good morning to everyone that's listening, and I also want to appreciate everyone that's listening this morning. We have some faithful listeners, and to you we want to say we love you and we appreciate you, and we do not take it lightly that you tune in every Thursday morning and join us for, our interesting conversations, sometimes controversial conversations, and
that was me, I'm sorry.
No, apologies accepted. Was that an icebreaker?
That was an icebreaker to just get us back into the field of things.
Yeah, because you know what? To those who are listening from wherever you are listening, it is cold in Johannesburg today. And so we are here, and we are here to have a interesting conversation once again.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me not go any further. Just enjoy it with us. Grab your cup of tea or coffee. I see we don't have anything yet.
Yes. We'll get them to get us something here now. I've got the sniffles this morning, and I've got a bit of a bluff going on. So that's just to soothe our conscience here a little bit, so that we can get this going through.
And to our host, in our absence, I just want to say thank you for entrusting us with the show this morning to just carry on whilst you are, as Anka says, living your best life. So go for it, girl. It's your season. Enjoy it. And I'd just like to invite everyone to like, subscribe, be a part of our conversation. Yeah. We like to engage with everyone who's listening out there, and I think this morning's conversation is a little bit of a controversial one. But I think it is an interesting one, definitely. We're speaking about one of the characters in the Bible that I've done a bit of research on this, and there's a bit of warped ideas and angles that she's approached with, which I think is a little bit of a dangerous territory if you don't do proper research. Yes. And if you do a bit of in theology, we say eisegesis and exegesis. Yeah. And eisegesis basically means that you are taking the meaning, you are creating a meaning around what you want to read out of the Bible. Yes, yeah. And exegesis is basically doing research on the context, on the times when this took place, and then seeing what the word actually means, and that is so important that we do exegesis. And the reason for that is so that we understand the word properly and relay it properly, so that we don't get funny ideas and funny ideologies from that. So how was your week? Let's jump into that first. Okay, I had a very busy week, starting from Monday. First, I had to sort out lots of my own personal things, as the week before I was on a short break. It wasn't long enough. I needed, from that break, I felt I needed some more rest. But as you know, we have a little bit of a family crisis right now that we're dealing with. And and I was supposed to be in the US
Very
of
far.
A.
Yes. You know what? For me, this
Yeah.
is bittersweet because I really do want for you to live your best life because I know you want to be with your grandkids. And at the same time, I'm selfish in the sense that I want you to be here also.
Oh, no,
You know,
I
so there's
know.
it's like a weighted scale, like on both sides. But
Yeah.
we're grateful that you
Yes.
are here, not
Yes.
under the circumstances.
Yes, yes.
But in due course, I do pray that God has a reason for everything, and you know, and why you had to stay a little bit longer.
Absolutely. I believe that.
You know, and I pray that He does reveal it to you sooner than later.
Yes, yes, yes.
That he basically He shows you the purpose of why you had to
Yes.
stay longer.
No,
I want to believe that I'm.
I
part
know
of that
God's
purpose.
timing is perfect too.
It is
and our times is in His hands. So yeah, I'm at peace, and I love being at home, and I love my people.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
You
I'm
know,
part of the
you know,
people.
you're one of my favorite people.
Love to
So-
hear it. Like, that's a bit of a confidence booster this morning. So let's jump right into it. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit this morning, as I'm putting myself on the spot.
Anka,
Right? So this is a risky one.
You know, die jong kinders, nee,
Look, let me put it you this way. I'm not just putting you on the spot. I'm putting myself on the spot.
okay,
So
go.
we're
Go
going
for
to
it.
go into a bit of a Bible trivia.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a risky one because it will expose both of us a little bit. I do not know the answers like beforehand. I did
Right.
not research the questions.
Okay.
So it's a game. It's a Bible app on my phone
Yeah.
that asks random questions.
Yes.
It's multiple choice, so it gives us a bit of leeway.
Okay.
So we're not completely in the dark. And I'm praying that it's not too difficult for both of us so that we
Okay.
are not too exposed.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
both of us are in the same position.
Okay, go for it, go.
So I'll ask you like 2 or 3 questions, and then you get to ask me 2 or 3
Right.
questions as well. Okay. Where did Jesus grow up? Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Jericho, or Nazareth?
That one is so close. What does the listener say?
Let's try to see what the listeners say.
Bethlehem.
I'll say it is not Bethlehem, but I don't say it's Bethlehem.
Okay.
But yes, it is not.
No,
Bethlehem.
no. He was from a small. No, was grew up or born?
Grew up.
Samaria.
No.
Is it? No.
Nazareth. Jesus
Nazareth.
of Nazareth.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is. Remember, we
He was
deal
from
with
a small town.
He was from a small town. But I think a lot of the times when we do this, it's especially when we deal with the word,
Yeah.
we focus on certain areas at a certain time. So there's a lot of like things that fall through the cracks. So
Right.
we're both on blast here this morning.
Right,
So don't
right.
stress. We're both on blast. What example in nature did Jesus give us showing God's provision? Ants, conies, birds, and spiders. I don't know this answer.
Birds.
Birds.
If you
That's
care for the
correct.
birds of the air.
Correct, that is
Yeah.
true. Who told Joseph not to fear taking Mary as his wife? The wise man, angel of the Lord, the shepherds, John,
The angel of the Lord.
the angel of the Lord. Last question, and then you get to put me on blast. Why should we practice charitable works, prayer, and fasting quietly? How should we practice? Quietly, in secret, with thanksgiving, openly.
In secret.
In secret. That is correct. Okay, so I don't know if I'm ready for that one.
Okay. Where was Matthew sitting when Jesus called him? In a fishing boat? By a well? On a donkey?
Matthew sitting on a fishing boat, a well, or a donkey?
Yeah.
A donkey? Let's see. We'll check just now. Sorry, this thing is giving us trouble.
It's a fishing boat.
Thank you to our producer. Thank you to our producer.
What does it say?
Okay, so it went away now. Sorry. Okay, you can ask a different question.
Okay. According to Jesus, the last will be last, first, slow, smart,
First.
fast.
Okay,
That's
so
correct.
just click on first, the answer, and if it goes green, it's correct.
It's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question will
So who baptized Jesus?
John.
Okay, let's see. I didn't even ask you. Yeah, it's John the Baptist.
John the Baptist.
How are you trying to be smart?
Oh, wait, sorry.
You are smart. Okay, who did God choose to build an ark? Oh, this one is like,
Noah.
if you didn't know it, you didn't go to Sunday school.
Yeah, you didn't go to Sunday school. Noah.
Okay, Noah, it's correct. And then who was Adam's wife? Elizabeth, Tabitha, Mary, Eve.
Hoek maar ek het nou maklike vrae gekry. Vra maar nog.
Ja, nou, okay, kom ons gaan aan. In the Sermon on the Mount, who did Jesus say would see God? Meek, peacemakers, merciful, pure in heart.
Jo, the meek. Lieg ek.
Okay, kom ons kyk.
The pure in heart.
Pure in heart.
Okay, dit was
Pure
een
in
van die
heart.
twee.
Yes,
Was een van
yes.
die twee.
Okay, I think this is, oh no, it went away.
Did it go away?
Cannot.
Okay, I think let's carry on with the
Yeah.
show. But I think we did fairly well. I think we did fairly well today
Yes, yeah,
in that. So let's jump into our story for today and delve into Bathsheba, the life of Bathsheba, who she was. And our topic for today is what power do we possess as a woman? And this is focusing in light of Bathsheba. So let's first tell the story of Bathsheba first.
Yes.
Before we ask these questions. So
Yeah.
who was Bathsheba? Bathsheba was the wife of Uriah, which was one of King David's trusted soldiers.
Right.
And Bathsheba's father was also one of a decorated soldier in David's army.
Yeah.
So she was known in the royal circles. She was known by royals and everyone also knew that she was married to Uriah.
Right.
However, they had a custom back in the day when a certain time, especially during the spring, and it was time during women's uncleanliness and all of that, they went to the rooftops to bathe.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this was a known custom.
Yeah.
Nou, David was eintlik 'n bietjie stout in die area van sy lewe gewees, want hy het geweet dis die custom. He wasn't supposed to be on the rooftops.
Right.
And one night he was feeling kind of bored with himself en toe gaan loop hy bietjie rond en toe sien hy iets met die oë
Yes.
wat hy nie moes gesien het nie.
Yeah.
And essentially he then saw Bathsheba, he liked what he saw, he sent messengers and he had her brought to him,
Yeah.
right? And this is the part that is always the controversial part, because a lot of people say that she was the one to blame, because she bathed on the rooftops and she went to David.
Yeah.
But we need to understand that this was her king.
Right.
It's not someone you said no to.
Yes.
It wasn't something that you had a choice in. As hy 'n bevel gegee het,
Yeah.
you had to oblige.
Right.
And they knew each other. Die Bybel lyk mos daai woord gebruik. They knew each other.
Right.
And he sent Bathsheba back home. And Bathsheba then later on sent word that she's pregnant.
Yeah.
Now, this is the sad part, really. And I know a lot of people love this aspect of, David was 'n man na God se hart.
Yes.
Which was true, the
It's
Bible
true.
did.
Yes.
Maar David was 'n deurmekaar man ook. Right? And David and Uriah was someone who was also close. It was mentioned in the Bible that he was fairly close to David. And he brought Uriah home and basically to sleep with his wife so that hulle nou kan die ding afspeel. Om 'n bietjie one thing to cover the other thing, to patch up the situation. And he was a righteous man. And he didn't because he didn't sleep with his wife or in the same house as his wife, because he felt he was out on a mission. He was called back. If the ark is outside and sleeping outside, the ark of the Lord is sleeping outside, how can he be comfortable enjoying the comforts of home? David called him back. David says to him, look, let's get married. He has a conversation. Hy maak bietjie vir Uriah dronk en stuur vir Uriah huis toe. Uriah once again slept at the gates. So he never knew his wife. Now they have a situation. Because if they had to do the counting when this baby is born, things wouldn't add up.
Right.
And this places Bathsheba in a very difficult position.
Yes.
Because that meant that she committed adultery.
Yeah.
And she could be stoned.
Right.
She could be killed for the fact that she committed adultery. And she was married to a righteous man. So what happens now? What power does this woman possess when she was essentially raped?
Right.
And I know, let's not say that harsh word on this platform. Let's rather say that something was taken from her.
Yes.
By force.
Without a consent, most probably.
Well, there's a bit of leeway there because it's her king.
Right, but now remember, when it comes to one's king, there's he or she, no, a king is usually a male, possesses an authority, which as a normal, a citizen or a subordinate, you obviously have to obey. So when one talks about, when I look at this story, first, to be honest with you, I always saw Bathsheba as
The one in the wrong.
the one in the wrong. Like, I want, with all respect, I placed her next to Delilah and, those
Yeah.
kind of females. Until, I had a different perspective when we now decided on this topic.
Yeah.
And I had to delve into a little bit into Bathsheba. And my mindset changed from seeing her as this die verleidelike vrou
Yeah.
into a victim,
Yeah.
Because from a biblical insight, at first glance, Bathsheba seems like a passive character in David's story, in Samuel, 2 Samuel 11, yet she possessed the power of presence, influence, and legacy. Because later on,
Yeah.
it comes, her legacy, the part of her legacy comes through.
Yeah.
And though she was a victim of David's misuse of power,
Yeah.
later we see her wisely intervening to secure Solomon's throne in 1 Kings 1:11 to 31, fulfilling God's plan.
Yeah.
So in all of this madness and what we as human beings would see as the uitgelate, if I may use that word, adulterous,
Yes.
affair, God's purpose prevailed in the end. Her name appears in Jesus' genealogy.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yes.
In
Yes.
Matthew 1-6, showing how God honored her story.
Yeah.
So the real life lesson here is that sometimes your power lies not in loudness, but in how you respond,
Yeah.
how you rise, right?
Yes.
And how and redirect your plan into purpose. So Bathsheba reminds women that your story isn't defined by what happened to you, but how you reclaim it,
How do you reclaim it?
right? Because there's, when there's a lot of Bathshebas today.
Yes.
In
yes.
our in am I right?
There is a lot.
There's a lot of, because we currently have one of the highest statistics of rape, violence, crime,
Yes.
sexual crime
Against women.
against women and against children,
Yeah.
male and female.
And it's a sad reality, and,
Yes.
and our socials are really on high with the whole Olerato story of there's quite a few other women
Yes.
out there that are going through this type of abuse or that has not
Right.
made it out alive
Yeah.
of this, just to shed some light on that. But coming back to what we're speaking about is that essentially that happened with Bathsheba. She was living a
Right.
good life. She was in royal circles, so there was no
Right.
want from her to. Well, that's what I derive from the story is
Yes.
that there was no want from her to want to be in the palace because she was already in royal circles.
No.
She understood all of that. She had a lavish life.
Right.
And she loved her husband.
Yes.
Because when her husband was murdered, essentially the king had her husband murdered.
Yeah.
Right? And when she heard her husband, she mourned for her husband. She wanted her husband.
Right.
It's not something that she didn't want. So which tells me that something was taken from her that she had no choice in.
Yes.
And a couple of years, I believe it's my very first sermon that I did was called Not My Mess, which was based on Bathsheba and the
Yes,
scriptures
yes.
from Bathsheba. It's not my mess.
Yes.
How many times do we as women go through something like that, like a divorce that we didn't want?
Absolutely.
Where we thought we were happy in our marriages, and then
Yes.
we just find out, oh, there's a third party. That's not a
Right.
divorce that we wanted.
No.
How many times we find, or even something being taken away from us, where we are then resulted in a child, or it's not something that we chose.
Yes.
And I'm speaking from a third party not having experience. If there's anybody out there that has experience in this, maybe just share your point of view.
Yeah.
How did you overcome it?
Right.
How did you get past that space? Because it's, from testimonies that I've heard, it felt like something was taken away, a sense
Yes.
power was taken away. Like
Right.
I had no say so in the matter.
Yes.
Was taken away in that moment. I'm not saying that it lasted, but in the
Right,
moment.
right.
How many of the women have not gone through something like that? And I'm speaking from someone that has maybe like choices were made for me.
Yeah.
That's taking something away from me in the moment.
Yes.
I didn't have a choice in a certain situation. But how would I say in this situation for her? How did she have power in a situation in the end? How, not in the end, but navigating the situation, because she went through not only one loss, but she went through two losses.
Yes, the loss of a child.
The loss of a child.
Yeah. And a child of this adulterous affair.
Yes.
Or I would not even say an affair, because like we said earlier on, it seems as if Bathsheba did not have a say in the matter. When you are ordered by a king, one needs to obey, am I right?
Yeah.
So we find even in today's life that men in particular, and I'm sorry men, because they are, I just want to emphasize that we do get good men. There
Yes.
are good men, and we thank God for those good men.
Yes.
But they are, I don't know if it's the minority,
Yeah.
the minority that will misuse their authority. And we find it in schools.
Yeah.
We find it in the parliament. We find it in churches, sadly. So,
Yes.
yeah, we find that men abuse their authority and prey on victims, on young. In the Catholic Church, for example, it would be,
Yes.
it's
A well-known
well,
fact.
it's a fact.
Yes.
With the priests that misuse the boys, and then it's not addressed. They just get moved to another parish, right?
Yeah.
To another church.
Yes, they just get moved around.
It just gets.
There's no accountability.
There's no accountability, and I experienced it in a. Sure, I started when I was very young. I started teaching. This headmaster, making
Inappropriate comments.
inappropriate advances.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
inappropriate
that's scary,
advances.
Yeah.
And as this naive young educator, I did not know how to handle it.
Yeah.
So you push away, and who do you talk to, guys? Back then, I'm thinking of back then. We didn't have a voice.
And
You didn't know where do you complain. There wasn't a board or a what you call
And the
this.
stigma was always the woman is in the wrong.
Yes,
Yeah,
what were you doing in
yeah.
the office? Oh, duh, I was taking my this or that.
It's my place of work.
It's my place of work. Nobody's going to believe you,
Yeah.
right?
Which is a scary fact.
Yes.
But we've evolved since times like that. I think now the scales are a little bit more tipped.
Yes.
But in spaces where we now do have the freedom to speak, and
Right.
there are people, there are advocates for women per se. But moving back to Bathsheba and the entirety of
Yes.
the power that she must have possessed. In all of this, Bathsheba kept quiet. Right?
Yes.
She must have had her pain.
Yes.
She must have had struggling to get over this, because she's dealt with the loss of her husband.
Yes.
She's dealt with the fact that something was taken away from her that she didn't want taken away from her. She
Right.
was happy in a marriage by the accounts of the Bible,
Yes.
right? And she was forcibly slept with, essentially.
Right.
And a baby came from that. But
Yeah.
now the baby in that situation was taken away. And the Bible clearly says that this was punishment for what David had done.
Yes.
So now again, she's being punished for something she didn't do.
Right.
Right? And I think a lot of the times we as women, we feel that way. We feel oppressed in that way.
Yes.
Why is all of this always happening to me?
Right.
However,
Yeah.
there comes a time when the prophet then comes to David.
Yeah.
And he tells him about a parable and all of that.
Yes.
And David gets upset during this parable
Yeah.
and says, "Tell me who this man is so that I can,
Right.
I can address this man."
Yes.
And David gets upset, and the prophet turns around and says, "No, you are the man."
Yes. Yeah.
And David breaks down, essentially, right? And for me, what is significant in this space is that, and I've been saying this for a while now, and it's something that I'm fairly passionate about, is that
Right.
when a situation arises, it's important for us to address the situation. There can be no reconciliation if if the problem is not being addressed, and that is
So you're talking about accountability.
accountability. And I think that is the fundamental part. Just a little bit of a side note here, when it comes to why David was a man after God's heart, is the fact that God kept him accountable.
Yes.
He addressed the issue with him,
Right.
and he repented and then
Right.
reconciled with God.
Right.
Doesn't matter what he did.
Yes.
There was a repentant heart
Yeah.
from David's side.
Yeah.
However, there was accountability. So as much as David did see what he did wrong and then he repented, there was always a consequence, hence the baby died.
Right.
There was a consequence, right?
Yes.
But that's just a little bit of a side note, just to throw it in there.
Yes, but that is true for today as well.
Yes.
That is absolutely true for today.
For
For when we have, and that is why we need to be so cautious when you think of affairs or having how can I say, relationships that with a married person, for example. If you're going to have a child with that person, God has forgiven you.
yes.
But the consequence,
Your wife might have even forgiven you.
your wife will continue, carry
Yes.
on living with you and take you back, and your marriage continues. But the consequence will remain
Yes.
like life,
Yes, yes. The consequence is
It's
alive
not
and well.
going to go away. It's going to be there,
And you're going to have to deal with those
and
consequences.
you have to deal with the consequence.
That's true.
But I also loved, and at the same time, I like to remind people who have illegitimate children that you might have had an illegitimate affair, but your child is not illegitimate.
That's true.
Because every child is a gift from God.
That is true. And we have to take responsibility for that
Yes,
child, which
yes.
is be there and show up as a parent for that child, regardless of how the child came to be, because that child didn't ask
Yeah.
to be there.
Yes.
Right? So if we have to go jump back into the story and
Right.
speak about what power did Bathsheba in that moment up until the point where she had lost, or let's look at the story in its entirety.
Yeah.
What kind of power did she possess,
For
in
me,
your opinion?
in my opinion, what power did Bathsheba possess? As a woman, if we look at Proverbs 31, women possess the power of wisdom,
Yep.
of leadership,
Yep.
of economic stewardship,
Yep.
and influence within their homes, right?
Yep.
And communities.
Yep.
Women are without us realizing, we are on a daily basis,
Yep.
we are very powerful and very influential.
Mm-hmm.
If we just look at, from a biblical aspect, we look at Esther, the life of
Yes.
Esther.
Yes.
We look at Deborah. We look at
Yes.
Mary, Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Priscilla, and all examples of empowered women in Scripture.
Yeah.
So the lesson for us there is that women have the power to create,
Yes.
to nurture,
Yes.
to lead.
Yes.
We have it to influence generations.
That's the one I'm looking for.
Influence generations.
Yes.
And to shift cultures.
Yes.
Right? Because I was listening to a podcast on a women from Uganda that found the story of Bathsheba very interesting because it related to their culture.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a say in who they get married to. Their husbands are chosen for them, right? So you have polygamy there as well, where they have more than one, wife.
I'm very happy God abolished that.
And also the fact that, like in their culture, they wish they can be the favorite wife because the favorite wife gets treated,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can just imagine the amount of jealousy that just roams in a space like that. And I mean, that is evident in Bathsheba's story as well. And we'll,
Right.
we'll get there eventually.
Right. So culture, and also the fact that just like the king, King David misused his power, their uncles and fathers abused their what do you call that? Their right as males.
Yes, sorry.
And abuse them sexually.
Yeah.
So, some people we actually lived, I remind myself often that we live very sheltered.
We do love shelter.
And we don't realize the pain, physical and emotional pain that other women are going through on a daily basis in certain cultures where you'd have absolutely no right over your body.
And I
You
can't
have
begin
no
to
say
mention.
in who you're going to marry. You have no say in who gets to access your body, And yet we are trying to teach our children, limits and boundaries
Yeah.
and
And I think that's why it's important to shed light on the fact that having someone being chosen for you is not necessarily that bad.
No,
When I say that, I say that with boundaries in
right,
place.
of course.
Because I think there must be balance in everything, and I think in our culture we will always have the parent standing over our shoulders saying,
Right.
"My kind, pas op vir daai," en dan is
Right.
ons mos 'n bietjie rebels en sê
Yes,
nee,
yes.
maar ons weet mos ook wat ons wil hê vir ons
Yeah,
lewens.
yeah.
So that's why I'm saying I say that with boundaries, what I just said just now,
Yeah.
because I know, I was just a cautious child growing up. I was always the one that said that nee, ek hoef nie 'n les te leer as jy hom klaar geleer het."
Right.
That was always the way I argued, because ek het nie gelyk seer kry nie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I said that if when I get married, there's two people that have a say in my marriage.
Right.
The one is very, I think, not unorthodox. I just think it's in today's life, it's a bit old school. Was the one that the first one was obviously my parents. If my
Yeah.
parents don't give a blessing, it's not going to happen.
Yes.
But then also my pastor,
Yeah.
right? Because I always believe that they see something that
So
we
true.
don't see.
So true.
Right. And the other aspect was from his parents.
Yes.
Whether he required it from his pastor, which was in his case specifically, it was his dad in any case, so it was
Yeah.
a double barrel. But if they don't condone it either, because I wasn't
Yes.
going to go into a family
Right.
that didn't accept me.
Yes, of
the same
course.
vice versa. I
Yeah.
wouldn't afford that for somebody else.
Yes.
It makes life, the dynamics of life, just so difficult, much more difficult.
Yeah.
But that was my uitgangspunt
Yeah,
in die lewe
yeah.
geweest. But there were certain things that our parents would say and see, because I dated before I met my husband, and my mother would say, "Ai, is die ene vir jou nie." En dan is ons so hardkoppig en
Ja,
ons
ja,
wel.
ja,
En
ja.
as dinge wat sy vir my het ek jou nie gesê.
Yeah.
Dis nie die een vir jou nie.
Yeah.
So when I say being picked for you, I mean more so that sometimes we need to heed
Yes, so true.
the advice that's being given to us,
Absolutely.
because we don't have to deal with certain consequences
Yeah.
if it's preempted.
Right.
So soms moet ons net so 'n bietjie eie wys wees nie.
Nee, ek stem 100% saam. I am a victim of not listening to one's parents and making use of their insight or their foresight that they have. It's a built-in, especially with a mom,
Yeah.
especially with mothers.
There's a sense.
There's a sense,
A
that
sixth
sixth sense that works over time. And so you, as a mom, would know that this
This is not the one for
there's
my
red
daughter.
flags. This is not the one for my daughter. And so, young people, if you're listening in, please heed, hey? And like you said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or you don't have to go through all the mistakes. Learn from the older folks. Learn listen.
From it.
Otherwise, you're gonna learn the hard way.
I was sorry, you can go.
Now, I just wanted to mention, the key lesson of the question that you just asked is that power is not always positional. Sometimes it's relational, spiritual, and generational.
And generational.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. And just to backtrack another sorry, I'm
Right.
just anyway. Just to backtrack a couple of sentences back when we were saying that sometimes we need to heed
Yes.
wise counsel.
Right.
And I was listening to a podcast somewhere in the week, and the person said something so profound. They said, we were never supposed to learn by experience. We were
Yes.
supposed to learn by grace.
Wow.
Meaning to say, God has put certain rules and laws in place.
Yes.
Because there's a consequence if you don't obey it.
Right.
So we had to just have faith
Yes.
in the fact that God said, don't do that.
Right.
So that we don't have to deal with the consequence.
Yes.
It's the same thing like when my child touches a hot stove.
Right.
My child is supposed to have faith in me as a mother that I have good intentions for my child.
Yes.
So if I say, don't touch this, it's hot. They're supposed to learn by faith and grace.
Right.
Like rather faith, right? Because if they don't touch it, they don't have to sit with the scars on their hands.
That's so true.
You know,
That's so
and
true.
I think we as parents, it's like, as I never worry, moet hy voel.
That's right.
We've gone into that notion.
But I think that sometimes parents say that not out of spite or anything, but maybe out of frustration.
Yeah, because you're not listening.
Because you're not listening. You
Yeah.
don't want to listen, so you get have to learn the hard way then. Yeah.
Because a lesson obviously needs to be learned.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say out there, if you're in a position where you don't have to deal with consequences,
Right.
rather learn the lesson. Someone else has already walked away. Now, I'm not saying don't take certain risks in life, but take a calculated risk.
Yes.
You know, don't take a risk that will where the cost will be too much for you to bear
So
at the end
true.
of the day. I
So
think it's so
true.
important that we do that. But heading back into the story of Bathsheba, our time is really running out today, Pastor Violet. I think
Oh, my word.
we're enjoying this chat a lot. I just want to jump on and say, then how did she navigate herself from being a victim to having a voice? What was her journey? What is your view of how she got to this space? So for me personally, how I would say that is that in all of this, Bathsheba could have made noise from the start. She could
Right.
have screamed from the rooftops and said, I was violated. She could have done that. She could have been defiant. She
Yeah.
could have told the king, nou moet jy my maar doodmaak because ek wil nou meer niks worry. Want,
Right.
you've already just... She could have done all of that. However, she kept quiet, and I'm sure she must have had a relationship with God.
Yeah.
She must have drawn a strength from there because she withstood so much.
Yeah.
She withstood the fact that she was violated. She withstood the fact that she lost her husband. She withstood the fact that she lost a child.
Right.
And now she's in the space. And also, what must the king's people think of her?
Right.
Because it's not a thing of the king. The king could do nothing wrong.
Yeah.
There's nothing that the king could have done wrong.
Yes.
So it must be you. You must be the culprit. And
Right.
and that's how Bathsheba was. A lot of women, it's not only you who thought that, a lot of women portray, like, when you do a deep dive into the research of this and you listen to people's point of view and people who do Bible study, they depict that story so wrong. It was amazing for me to see that people, and they put this out on social media, this
know.
woman. You need to look at the culture of the time, and the Bible blatantly states that she mourned for her husband.
Right.
If she was over her husband, she wouldn't have mourned for her husband.
No.
Also, God would not have put her into the lineage
Or if she, yeah.
because there was impure intent there.
Right. Or if she, for example, lured the king.
Yes.
If she wanted to, if her purpose of bathing was to entice the king, if she would not have mourned.
She would not have mourned because clearly she wanted something else
Because
for her
clearly
marriage.
she wanted, something, or she wanted to be, have that position of being the queen or one of the king's wives.
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yes.
So she might have been intentional in her using a sexual appeal.
And
then she would not have mourned.
She would not
Would
have
there
mourned.
be any reason van ek wil dan hy gaan.
Ek wil hom daar
Ek
gaan,
wil
so
hom
hoekom
vir-
sal ek nou
hoekom
hartseer
sal ek
wees?
nou hartseer wees?
Ja, want nou is die man mos nou uit
Hy
my
mos
pad
nou
uit,
uit
nou
die
kan
pad
ek in die koning se paleis gaan bly. But the other thing is, for me, that is significant is that she's in the lineage of Jesus Christ, right?
Right.
And a lot of people would say, yeah, but God used in a prostitute, Rahab, and those, they had
Yeah.
dubious past. However, from a certain point in their lives, there was pure intent.
Right.
When she became part of the chosen people, part of Israel, she had pure intent.
Right.
So therefore, her offspring was included in the lineage. It's to teach us that our past doesn't matter, but our future does.
Absolutely.
What we decide now for our future, when you know something,
Yeah.
you can change the trajectory of your future, and for generations you can traject the influence you have. And that's why for me it's so important to understand that her voice
Yes.
came from that. She kept quiet. She was pious.
Yes.
And she submitted because this is where I am right now. That's true. But Lord, where are you taking me?
Yes.
Right? She could have been defiant in the palace.
Right.
She could have, like for instance, what Vasti did.
Yeah.
She could have stood up for her rights.
Right.
And what happened to Vasti?
It cost her life.
It cost her. Her story was just told
Right.
for two verses essentially. But here you see Bathsheba, a whole story is being depicted. Her whole story is being told.
Right.
It even carries on into Kings,
Yes.
where she now has the impact of another child that was birthed from this union.
Wow.
Right? Now remember, her child is not the only child.
Right.
David was stout.
Yes.
David het klomp kinders gehad.
Right.
Which means they all were vying for the throne. Right? But none of these women had influence to come to the king's
Yes.
quarters.
Yeah.
But Bathsheba did.
Right. So you asked this question, and so from a biblical insight, Bathsheba could have remained silent, yet she approached King David to remind him of God's promise regarding Solomon, because she became an advocate for justice and played a role in fulfilling divine destiny.
Yeah.
So, in real life application, many women go through seasons where they are misused or misunderstood,
Yep.
right? But like Bathsheba, she didn't stay in shame. She used the voice to secure her son's future. She walked in restored honor. And the lesson we learn from her is that your voice is part of God's victory plan. Don't be afraid to speak up.
Yep. Don't be afraid.
Don't
With
remain.
grace.
Obviously, yes.
With grace.
Yeah, because especially like we said, the story of Bathsheba and David is still relevant today.
Yes.
It is still relevant in today's lives. So if you are in a situation at work where you are being harassed sexually, or not only sexually, but being, in your work situation, people are wat is die woord wat ek soek? Wanneer hulle jou onderdruk,
Yeah, oppress.
oppress you, speak up, but
Yeah.
in a respectful way.
Yes.
But be assertive. Speak up for yourself. You don't have to remain silent. In her case, like you said, she was silent, and there was a purpose for her to remain silent. Because if she, was like Vashti, God's purpose would not have prevailed, and Solomon would not have been born.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. If she was defiant about it, if she
she was
was
defiant.
and she didn't want anything, she could have raised the son vindictively also.
Yes,
She
yes.
could have told him everything. But the fact that Solomon became who he was,
Right.
he was also mentioned as one of the greatest kings, despite how his life ended.
Yeah.
That speaks volumes of how he was raised.
Yes.
And as a mother, that's the power we have. I mean, I'm taken back by whenever we're sitting on the couch or
Yeah.
I'm busy doing something, then I'll hear the kids ask me a question, or mommy, can you please help me? And I'm like, your father is sitting right next to you. Sometimes we get annoyed by it, but
Yes.
it's not to say that the husbands are not active in their lives.
Right.
It just says that because that's the influence we have on
Yes.
our children.
Yeah.
I'll never forget one morning, they were still very small, and she had my bonnet on, and she came in there and she had like these lines drawn here, and I asked, what's going on in your face? And she's like, look mommy brows, because she sees me filling in my brows in the
Yes,
morning.
yes.
So that's the influence. Our children look
Right.
at us as mothers and how we're going to react or handle a situation.
Absolutely.
We control the mood in the room. We control the atmosphere in the house.
Yes. And although the dad is the stronger
He's the priest,
person,
yes.
like the priest in the home, and physically stronger than the mom.
Yes.
When kids get hurt, who do they help for? Who do they call out?
They will come sit on your lap and then
Yes. Yes, the nurturing that moms give. So we are playing such a vital role in
We are.
our children's lives.
especially
That's
especially if we are raising sons.
yes.
We have daughters and
I
we
like-
raise them, but especially if we're raising sons. Because yes, and this is I don't know why this is a controversial. It's not controversial
Yeah.
to me. It's not controversial biblically, but in today's life with the whole feminist, they are being given the mandate to lead, to
Yes,
take the ownership.
yes.
However, that doesn't mean that we we don't have a say. That just means that we are the wind beneath their wings.
Yes,
We are what keeps them up there.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important for us to not be, I mean, we could have been a Jezebel and be vindictive and manipulative about it, but then, I mean, I mentioned this in last week's show.
Yeah.
Jezebel het ook nie baie ver gekom nie.
Right.
There's no place where she is. There was nothing left of her.
Yes.
I'm saying that I want to be remembered for years to come with a legacy to say, daai vrou was 'n wyse vrou geweest. Daai vrou het haar kinders in 'n sekere manier, in 'n sagte manier groot geword.
true.
What do you want other people to say about you? And I think that when we do proper research about Bathsheba, what can we say about Bathsheba? Just that.
Yeah.
Because at the end, one of David's klomp vroue het besluit om to usurp him before he even died and try and make... What happened? She died too. Haar kind
Yeah.
is dood.
Yeah.
Nothing became... Death lies in defiance.
Yeah.
So essentially what I want to say is that it's not... Yes, we have a story to tell.
Yes.
And we should tell it. We do have a voice. It's not in what we're saying, it's in how we're saying it.
Right.
Because when she approached, obviously she had the counsel of Nathan, the prophet.
The prophet, yeah.
Yes. She had the counsel of him. But in the last moments, when she approached him and she reminded him, he listened. If she was defiant at some point, she wouldn't even have access to him.
Right.
For her to even remind him of that promise.
So what are you actually saying? Is that her attitude? Was it her attitude?
Yes. It was an attitude.
Yeah.
It was how she said
How
it.
she said
Yeah.
it.
See,
And women don't realize that there's so much power in being gentle as
being
well. There's such a fine line. Yes, one needs to be assertive. Yes, one needs to have a voice.
Yes.
But being gentle is a beautiful characteristic
Yeah.
of a woman. Right?
It is.
Not a pushover, guys.
Not a
No. Not for somebody
Hence
to trample on you.
the assertiveness.
Yeah. Hence, yeah.
I like what Lady A said last week. She said, sommige tye, dan gebruik ek die woorde van die woordeboek en nie die woord nie. And that's what we sometimes do. I mean, yesterday, and this is just bringing it home and being more relatable, is that yesterday I was upset about something.
Yeah.
Toe besluit ek gaan nou my man laat weet.
Yeah.
Ja, maar jy luister mos nie vir my nie. En
Ja.
toe is ek sommer net kwaad daarna.
Ja.
My man het niks gehoor. He went on with his life. En toe vra hy my nog, nou maar wat gaan nou met jou? Toe is ek meer naar oor die situasie. And then later on I realized, you know what, let me just make a cup of tea or whatever.
Right.
And I supposed to say, baby, but I don't appreciate that. This is what
Right.
happened and this is how I
Yes.
feel. And you know, no hoor my man my. Because there's a certain gentleness. It's not
So true.
what we say,
It's how we say it.
And we have so much more influence
Yeah.
when we realize
Yeah.
it's in the how.
So true. Just backtracking on what you said earlier on, Anka, on how we as moms have influence in how we raise our boys. You know, I think the fact that we have taught, like I'm not talking about earlier, you know, that boys are not supposed to cry.
Yep.
Real boys, real men don't cry, and so what we then perpetuate is the fact that men are not in touch with their emotions.
Yep.
They feel that they always have to be the stronger ones, and so when we want them to relate to us emotionally, they can't.
Yeah.
Because they weren't raised, they weren't socialized to
be in contact with
their emotions. Whereas we are so much in contact with our emotions. We cannot function. I cannot function, for example, with my husband if there's been an argument.
Yes.
In a loving way.
It's awkward, yeah.
It's
like
awkward.
Yeah.
It becomes awkward because I
There's
am a
no
human.
relation, yeah.
Yes, it affects the relationship.
En hy kan aangaan.
Hy kan aangaan, hy kan sommer, ja,
Ja, hy kan aangaan met sy lewe. Dan vra hy nog vir jou, wat gaan aan met
wat
jou?
gaan hy? Hy het al afgeswitch, but you still dwelling on that.
Yes.
you
Because
know?
we are emotional
Because
beings.
we are emotional beings.
beings.
What is the listener saying?
Well, we have Clayton our producer has been very interactive. Thank you so much. He was part of the quiz and he did give us an answer earlier where he said Nazareth, good morning, the angel, first John, Noah, Eve, and a pure heart. Thank you. You did say a pure heart and ek was verkeerd. Dankie, Clayton. And well, we have Simone Lazarus that is saying, loving the conversation this morning all the way from Qatar. I see your stories always. So nice to have you be part of the conversation. Thank you so much for commenting. from our side, Pastor Violet, we still have 5 minutes, so we can
Okay.
still chat for another 5 minutes
okay.
on our topic.
Good.
And then, we're going to have to sign off. But I think I really enjoyed today's topic. And for me, I've been passionate this whole year. Working with the ladies, and
Right.
the theme for this year is I am poised for purpose in the ladies at church, and which is based on the Esther 4:14, and it
Right.
speaks to. And my aim this year is I know we get taught a lot about women's empowerment, and I know
Right.
we get taught about a lot how we must be stronger as women. And
Right.
the challenge I have with that is that the scales are being tipped now, where we as women have become toxic.
Right.
And that for me, and this is, I've seen it, we do counseling with couples and marriages, and you start seeing that this toxicity has infiltrated certain areas, and it's causing division.
Yes.
And that in itself is demonic.
Right.
And for me, it's been looking at the women in the Bible and seeing how they use their influence,
Right.
how they were poised with a piety and a humility.
Right.
So we don't need to look at these aspects and how were these women in the Bible and how they obtained so much, they
Right.
achieved so much
Right.
from going through Leah, Rachel and Leah,
Yes.
even Bathsheba, right? Tamar, there's another lady I'd like to delve into Tamar, because that's another one that for me is also a bit controversial.
Right.
But it's also an exciting lady
Yes.
to delve into. But coming back to Bathsheba and those traits that she possessed was she could have really been vindictive about certain things. She could have been upset. She could have been angry. But what I'm seeing from the story is that she must have dealt with those issues. She must have dealt with her pain. She must have dealt with it differently. But she built a relationship with the person who had now become a husband.
Right.
As much as they had taken away something, there's something that is very powerful, and that she must have forgiven him. And sometimes I think when a husband,
Forgiveness is powerful.
it's so
Oh
powerful.
my word.
And sometimes, but what is also significant in that is that David had a sense of repentance. So this is what I always say, and I stand by this, that reconciliation cannot happen if the core issue is not being addressed. Because if the core issue is being addressed, that means it makes it, I can actually now forgive this person, right? So forgiveness and reconciliation are not in the same sentence.
But isn't it hard for certain people, or especially men, to deal with the core?
It is. It is.
You just mentioned that now. They like to avoid,
Yes.
especially narcissists.
Yep.
They never take accountability.
Accountability.
They want just to brush things off.
Yeah.
Ag nee man, kom ons maak net asof niks gebeur, as if nothing happened. Let's just carry on. Let's just and what we want for them is to unpack,
Yes.
their feelings, and to say, when you said this, I felt like that, and
Yes.
when I said that, this is what I meant, and etc., etc. But there's certain people, and like I said earlier, especially narcissists, that never ever would want to acknowledge that I was wrong, or in making you feel like, and I apologize. I'm sorry if I made you feel it wasn't my intention. No, you'll never get something.
You'll never get something.
You'll never get it.
And I think that's the part where it's important for us to pray. When we pray for our husbands, and I know I said this now,
Yeah.
that David was 'n deurmekaar man. Ja, die man was deurmekaar. But
Yeah.
when we pray, we say, Lord, give me a husband, or make my husband after your heart. It should be in the space that he could be able to acknowledge what he did, and it was
my
wrong.
word.
And now we can start talking and working towards something. En nie David se ander vannigheid nie.
And
Net daai gedeelte.
daai gedeelte. And you know how important that part is.
Yeah.
When a man, especially, I'm not picking on the men, but yeah, because you get women that's like that too.
Yes.
There's
We have to
women
take
too.
accountability
Yes,
as well.
that do not want to take accountability. But you mentioned something very profound. If the man is a man that serves God and listens to God and has a relationship with the Lord, then he would, say, ek is jammer.
Yeah.
Because I believe the Holy Spirit has an influence on that person. I used to tease and say, my husband and I have the custom of reading devotion together. So when there was something that I was unhappy about, I would use that. Know that we are reading the word now.
Ja, so
Ons is met die Here besig nou.
dis in die woord,
It's
kan
in
nie
the word.
verkeerd
It's in the
wees
word. So now you're gonna have to, I can deal with this issue, and he will have to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, my baby. I'm sorry,
But
my
that's
wife."
beautiful,
It is.
That's so beautiful. Now,
Yes.
when I said you sound like me, I was thinking of something completely different because my
Yeah.
husband made mention of the fact that whenever I want something and he says no, to say, die woord het gesê is, as jou vrou nie gelukkig
Dan
is,
gaan
en
die
dit
Here
nog
nie
op
gebede
bede
hoor nie.
Now, that's manipulative. Don't do that, ladies.
Right,
It's a joke between me and my husband, though.
Yes.
But something that's very important to just going back to
Right.
Bathsheba and what you was he saying here now is that
Yeah.
I think it's important that to acknowledge that yes, women go through a lot
Yes.
every single day.
Yes. Oh, yes.
However, it's very important for us not to be the victim,
Right.
right? Because she could have been a victim.
Yes.
She could have had a victim mentality.
Yes.
But she didn't, and she achieved so much more. And people are
Yeah.
like, yeah, but she was just a mother. Yes, she was a mother. A mother to a son who would then become king. Because remember, there was a lot of others. There was Absalom, daar was baie
Yeah.
ouens daar in die mix.
Yes.
Wat kan koning geword het. But God chose Solomon. The king chose Solomon.
You know, you when you said victim, it reminded me of the victim mentality that can cause self-pity.
Yep.
And self-pity in itself is such a hateful emotion because it will break you down, girlfriend.
I am here because this happened to me. I am here and I'm dealing with this now and I don't have a job because that happened. You have to rise above your circumstances. You have to be a victor.
Take charge of your life.
And you have the power. That's your voice.
Yes.
That in itself is your voice.
Right.
Is to take a stand for something or to move past that. I was listening to this one story where this lady, she worked herself up to be some bank manager, and then they tracked her down, they forced her into robbing the bank, and they later on said no, she was in on it.
Right.
And she decided, nee, wag hierso. I built my life up here. I honestly got to this space.
Yeah.
And I have a daughter here. What she did was, she said, ek gaan nie hier bly nie. She took that story and she turned it into dealing with the trauma, dealing with everything, and how you can overcome these things and how you can become so much more. And she became an author. You know, her daughter also became her own author in her own right.
Wow.
And you say to yourself, she could have said, yeah, let me geroof een dag and this is when my daughter's life went down the wayside. And we are not negating the fact that people do go through things, and then it's difficult. For some people it may be more difficult than others. We have different emotional thresholds, if I can put it that way. Yes, true. But I think it's important that we realize that we can stay in the space and have a pity party, or we can rise above it and achieve so much more. And we have the power. God has given, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. We draw our strength from Him. So it's not something we have to do out of our own. I'm not advising any lady to do anything out of their own power, because then it becomes misguided and unbridled, that we discussed in last week's topic, which is for me beautiful because now they sort of like flow into one another. So any of your last comments? Ons is nou lekker oor tyd gepraat. So any last comments from you?
Well, you know, about this, God's view on women's power, I just want to say that God's view on power is rooted in purpose and humility, love, and service. Women's power isn't a threat to God's order.
Yep.
It's a vital part of it. Right? So the lesson we learn here is that God doesn't limit women's power.
Nope.
He anoints and He appoints, just like Paul says in Galatians, that there's no male or female in God's kingdom. So we as females, we have lots of power within our control that we need to use. And I believe that the church is in an exciting period in history.
Yes.
Am I right?
We are.
We are living in a time that is also very volatile and very challenging for the church. But I believe through God's power and His grace and what does Paul say is in Corinthians about love, hope, ne?
Yes.
Is it love, hope, and faith?
Yes.
But the most important
Of these.
of these three is love. And so, as the body of Christ, as the church, as women in particular, if we can just start to love one another, if we can just start to love the unloved. You know, I walked past, drove past these people, the homeless people.
Yes.
And I saw that there were women now
Yeah.
lying, on the side of the road, making their home under the bridge. And I questioned myself and I said, Lord, what am I doing? Is this okay for me that another woman is lying
Lying
there in the cold? And what are we doing? What am I doing? So, we cannot save the world per se.
Yes.
But we need to, as women, find out who is within my sphere of
Yes.
influence, my immediate influence, and where can I make a difference?
Yeah.
That should be, our heartbeat, is to make, and your child is my child.
Yeah.
Ubuntu, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And it doesn't matter, I was sharing with someone this morning, it doesn't matter if my son didn't amount to anything. I am so proud of other people's boys and sons because they are my sons too.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
Not that I'm putting my son down, that's a story
It's
for
just a
another day.
general
It's just
statement.
a general
Yes.
statement.
Yeah, but I
yeah.
get what you're saying, that
Yes.
meaning to say that even if I'm not doing well, let me be happy for the next
Let
person.
me be happy for the next,
Next
person.
person.
Let me celebrate someone, and let me not be scared to celebrate
Yes.
somebody else's success.
Yes.
Rather change your narrative and say, Lord, if you could do it for Anka, you can do it for me.
Yes, I like that
If
one
you
because
can do
that's
it
one of
for
my life, my
Anka.
mottos.
Yes.
I always get so excited when someone gets something or achieves something because I
Yeah.
feel like, yo, ek het dit nou gekry. I feel
Right.
like that. But it's from a genuine place. So we've reached the end of our show, and I had such an amazing time, a lekker chat. And we will be here next week, same time, same place. So please do tune in, like, subscribe, and comment, and tell someone about us, please. We'd like to have a little bit more
Yes.
interaction because it's fun. It's fun when ladies talk. We'll just have a little bit of a tea. Get your tea. Next time we will have, my apologies, we will have
Yes,
tea
yes,
here next
yes,
time because ons was 'n bietjie droom mond vandag, maar ons is so right. Ons is so right.
I just want to, just a last shout out to the sisterhood, my personal sisterhood, to Lady S and Pastor Joan and Pastor Sandy, and just, friends are so important. Sisters are so important, and the support. So just a shout out to them this morning. I just love you guys, and if you don't have a sisterhood, or belong to ladies, come and join us, please. Please
Yes.
come and join us at Crystal so that you can become part of a sisterhood.
And it's so important.
So important that you feel you're not alone.
Yes. I just wanted to say that you guys have inadvertently become my support system. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for your sisterhood because there's something in it for me too, because I get the love and the support.
Right,
So
right.
from us, it's a goodbye. Stay blessed.
Yes.
Stay at the feet of Jesus, and see you next week.
In the shade, as I look upon my life, in the shade, there's a passion inside. Heaven knows I'm living my dreams. As I look upon my